Greetings and welcome to the How We Do Digital Ministry podcast. I'm Christopher Harris, founder of Faith Growth. You can find us at faithgrowth.com, where we help our church clients build their digital presence and engage their communities online. On this podcast, I have conversations with church leaders and ask them to share about their digital ministry in their own communities. Today, I am talking with the Reverend Dr. Joelle Colville-Hanson. She is the director for Evangelical Mission for the ELCA in the Northeastern Iowa Synod. Pastor Joelle, please introduce yourself and tell us how you do digital ministry.
Hi, Christopher. Thank you for inviting me. So I do digital ministry, and I work in the Synod office and the ELCA and mission, renewal, vitality, evangelism, all those things. And I have a particular kind of niche is helping congregations do that online, think about their digital ministry. And not because I always tell them, we're not going to get online and we're not going to do social media just because it's the cool thing, but because that's where people are. Yes. That's where we engage with people. And it's, you know how they talk about shy Lutherans, that we don't like to talk about our faith. But I tell people, you'll share, this really good meal back when we were going to restaurants. You'll share, what a great meal you had. You could talk about how you liked what your pastor said in your sermon. And people find that a lot easier to do because they're not forcing it on anyone. If they don't want to hear them about their pastor's sermon, they can just keep scrolling. Mm-hmm. And it has been a pretty good way to help people engage with their communities more, doing that online. So that's kind of where I've been working on the synod level.
What I find most interesting is that, the whole church got online, in the last year because of COVID, but you've been helping churches get online for, many years before COVID. So you're an early adopter, you're old school, as they might say. So tell me, in your kind of experience, even pre-COVID, why did you find technology and digital to be so important for ministry and important for churches to begin to embrace?
Well, I was back in 2009, and I actually went on Facebook, and this was like, I don't know if anybody remember Flare, exchanging Flare, and because it was the youth, and you couldn't call them, nobody read their mail anymore, and they weren't answering their email anyways, and it was really just a way I was hoping to communicate with the youth. And what was funny was, at first my daughter, she was in high school, she was so embarrassed she wouldn't friend me. But all of her friends did, because they thought it was so cool, because there were not pastors, there were not old people on Facebook. And they thought that was so cool that eventually she had to follow me. And so it was kind of and then I started to see, some of the real possibilities of reaching out to people, and more adults started getting online, and I saw the possibility there. And it's funny you say we were already online. It was not that hard. They had to do some online streaming. They had to learn some of that. But most of our congregations, they were set up with a Facebook page already because of this work I had done to help teach them how to have a Facebook page. So it was one less thing. Yeah. All they had to do was figure out how to push the live button, which really wasn't that hard. So our people really got on board, and I was really amazed that even some of these pastors that were having a trouble with being on Facebook, they might not even had their own Facebook page profile, but they went online. And you just see these no offense to these old guys, but these old guys in their sweaters in their living room, just talking to people. And I heard some criticism from some bigwigs about how not all the congregations have great technical live stream. It isn't really polished, but in our synod, we're mostly rural synod, people loved seeing their pastor and his cat sitting on the couch talking about the Bible, and they did all kinds of things. They didn't just do Sunday. There's still pastors doing devotions every morning in their sweaters on their couch. And people love it. It was really quite amazing. And I feel like, it helped that we did some of the work beforehand, so that there was one less thing they had to worry about, because they already had it all set up.
No, that's good. Yeah, because it was a lot for all churches. So anything that made it easier, good for you and your work in the synod there. I do think it's also, it's unique, as I don't know of any other DEMs, as we call them in the ELCA, your position, that have this unique bullet point in your job description, basically, right? That is like, how we're going to do evangelism is technology is going to be important. And, your synod is very forward thinking that way, to have you on board to help with that. Maybe just a good example, maybe a heartwarming example of kind of digital ministry and the faith and community online. Is there something that really sticks out for you of how you've really seen God in action, seeing Jesus online?
Well, I just really think how everybody is themselves, the authenticity that you see, everybody did it a little bit differently. I can't think of any really specific stories, because I don't get all those good stories. But just that, you'd have some people that would they'd actually go to the church and do like an evening prayer, and they'd play the piano and have singing. And like I said, some people would do a morning devotion. It just was the variety and the how people were just able to be themselves. I think that part, even more than, I think it really brought community closer together, more than just seeing people every Sunday in their dress up clothes. I think it was one way. I mean, I know they miss seeing people in person, but I think it brought them closer in some ways. But even, this is technology too. Talk about old school. We had a lot of churches that they just felt like they had to get together. So they went to the parking lot and they got those three-way radios, and those, I don't know if you remember the drive-throughs where you drive-in movies, where you put the thing in your car, or even you listen to it on your radio, and people would get in the parking lot and have church in the parking lot through the radio. That's technology. Yeah. But they felt like they were together, and they would honk their horns at each other and wave. And it's just amazing how many people like that. Now, me, I don't want to get up and sit in the car in the parking lot. I'd rather sit in my living room. But everyone's different, and that's the thing. Technology can accommodate the different ways people want to worship. So that the parking lot thing was a surprise to me, how popular that was.
Well, what you just said about it really showed the authenticity. And it allowed people to connect with their church leadership, their pastor in a new way. What do you hope, as the church is looking for what's next, as we're, pandemic, getting vaccinated, I don't like to say things were going back or reopening, because I kind of think we were always open. But we are going to be reevaluating how we are called to do and be church. What are you hoping that we carry forward, that we learn? What are maybe some lessons learned in COVID that you hope will carry forward, or your churches will carry forward, I guess?
Yeah, well, I think most of our churches they were really surprised that they had people joining them from all over the place. And people realized that, and also a lot of our churches have gone back to in-person worship, which maybe, I might have an opinion about that, but they also recognize that they still have needed to do the online services and thinking about ways they are church beyond their own neighbors. What I'm worried about is the toll this is taking on our clergy, because in these small, rural churches, the pastor does everything. That's not a healthy model, and pastors know it, and everybody knows it except the congregation itself. And it's a lot of work to plan, and it's more work to put together an online service, and then to do both. That they recognize they need both. And hopefully recognizing that the clergy can't do it all, that hopefully that reaching out and getting more people and get more lay people involved in it, and working together more. I was just saying, there's no reason why, if you're doing it online, if you have an online sermon, there's no reason why it has to be one sermon, a different pastor doing a different sermon for each individual. Why can't you do a round robin? And this week,
some of these smaller
we're going to have a sermon from this person for this week next. So I'm hoping, just because it's so unsustainable for one person to do it all in one congregation, that this might have people work together more and use the gifts of their lay people and not just the clergy. One can hope, right?
Yeah, well, no, I hope that. Well, I mean, we see some good models of that from some of our, I guess, fundamentalist brothers and sisters, or just people who have been using technology better, like Hillsong. I mean, Hillsong is kind of, we have one preacher each week, and it goes out to all these different places. And I mean, it's a very successful model. And yeah, I mean, what if we were more collegial and our churches were able to work together, and the technology now enables them to actually not be disconnected, but they can do joint services. I think that would be, to me, that's phenomenal. And I think it's what really helps our, a lot of times I think our rural churches think we forgot about them, there's no resources, there's no that, you only spend time on the churches in the city or something. And it's like, now here's a way that we can really bring them some resources to hopefully, give them a new burst of energy, if you will. Or
well, we got,
that's what I hope.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is we got a gift from a church that they had some extra money for churches to use in the time of COVID. And that was all that said on it. And we said, you know what, we're going to call this a technology fund. And that if you need some help, just a small amount of money, because some needed their Wi-Fi updated. Mm-hmm. Some people wanted those little radio transmissions so they could have parking lot. And so out of that fund, we were able to give these just little grants, $50, $150 here, to help people update their technology. Because we wanted to let them know we haven't forgotten about you. We understand that in some places, it's a little hard to get Wi-Fi. You might need a booster or something like that. And the way we were able to kind of think creatively, so we need to help. We're going to help churches in times of COVID. Well, for us, that meant we're going to help them with technology.
Yeah. No, which, I mean, goes right to, we're helping them connect. I mean, the technology helps them connect. And how can they, in this time that we physically needed to be separate for safety, we were able to still connect. And even like with your example earlier about the authenticity of the pastor and the cats or other animals, it's just, it may not have been that in-person intimacy, but it was another level of intimacy that, right, because we see a fuller picture than just the person in a robe or an alb up front leading worship. It's a fuller picture of our pastor.
Yeah, and it didn't have to be, because it didn't need to be all professional, because when they go to church in person, it's not all professional. If they wanted that kind of a church, they would go to that kind of church. So I think I've heard some experts, say, well, we got to work on helping them make their live stream be more professional. Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's more about the authenticity, that you can just make sure that the person at home still feels engaged and you're actually talking to them,
right? As
opposed to, you don't want to go to like, oh, they're just talking about the people that are in a pew, and then I'm just like a fly on the wall watching. Right. So as long as you can kind of get beyond that barrier and still remember occasionally to look right at the camera, announcements to the people at home, specific thing, a specific welcome and things like that. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah, I remember I was at a church once where they had a radio. This is before pre-COVID, and they had a radio broadcast, and you had to speak into the microphone for the people in the radio. And somebody got up to make announcements, and she said, "I don't need a mic." And the pastor said, "Well, the people that are listening on the radio need a mic." Oh, yeah, right.
Yes, exactly. Oh, just use the mic when it's offered.
Yes.
Radio or no radio. That's one of my pet
Exactly.
peeves, but that's a whole nother.
Because not everybody can hear. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's very, very ableist to say, I don't need a mic. And yeah. Hopefully we've all learned. Hopefully we're all doing better that way.
Exactly. So tell me, I mean, what is kind of, if you think about the congregations you're working with, and what do you maybe envision that those churches would look like in 5 to 10 years from now?
Well, I think something like you were saying about Hillsong and some more satellite kind, because a lot of these churches are getting smaller and we're having trouble. The pandemic was hard on a lot of pastors. Some pastors got burnt out. So already we're having trouble attracting pastors to the Northeast Iowa Synod. I think maybe we're going to be looking at some more satellite, doing the live stream kind of things for people that don't have, that need some help for pastors. Well, another thing that we did, because we've got a lot of churches that don't have any rostered leadership. And so we knew everybody's recording a sermon. Everybody's recording a sermon. So we made a sermon library, a recorded sermon library. That's just a Google Drive. We asked pastors, upload your sermon. And I don't care if you think it's good enough or not. If it's good enough for you to show to your congregation, it's good enough for the library. And then that library was available. That link was open. That link was available. Anybody, any congregation, if you need a sermon. Also, it helped too, because sometimes pastors would get sick we had a few come down with COVID. They get sick at the last minute. And they couldn't get a. What do you do? What do you do if you have online services and the pastor can't do it? So we have a library. We try to have it that it's for every, on the lectionary Sunday, but there's no need. It's not necessary for you to have a sermon that's on the lectionary.
Yeah.
The staff took turns during Lent doing a sermon, and I did mine on a saint, on Perpetua. So, it was on March 7th, but you could do that anytime. So that's one thing, is trying to think of these ways to make things available, because we're going to need to look at technology more because of the shortage of full-time rostered. That's our ELCA fancy word, because not all the people that serve in congregations are necessarily ordained word and sacrament. We have deacons, but we even have a shortage of them. So we're gonna have to start thinking creatively, using technology to help provide care and worship, and for congregations that can't afford full-time leaders in the congregation. So there's other things too that we have to do, but digital ministry is definitely going to be one of the tools in our toolbox we're going to have to look at.
That's cool. Well, and I like that y'all are thinking about it at the synod level. You're not just, kind of, we'll let every church figure it out for themselves, and that you're making resources available like the sermon library, and because that's really, really where we are with the technology is that the church is kind of caught up. I always say what I say is the church really caught up to 2011. We know
right.
how to, everything that we're doing right now was actually available to us in 2011.
Right.
And so now, which that's good, and it helped get us through this pandemic. And as we look at where we're being called next, we'll be, okay, what are the other avenues? Like you're saying, technology is going to be a key in helping the clergy or rostered leadership shortage, and so we have to keep thinking that way. And I think it's important that our leaders are leading, like at the synodical level, in helping that conversation happen, because it's going to be more coming together than just individual churches figuring that out. So no, that anyways, I'm thankful for that. Is what my whole point there was to say thank you, thank you, Joelle, and your colleagues. Oh,
you're welcome.
Yeah, honestly, well, and just for the listeners, Joelle and I have known each other for many years now, and we met on social media originally, and one of her colleagues did introduce us in person later, and we met in person at an event, the ELCA youth gathering, for the first time. But we had been, talking online for several months or years before that, actually, in some of the same circles. So that's actually how we first met. So social media has power to bring us together.
Yep.
What would be your biggest tip to any congregation right now as they're thinking, okay, COVID is coming to whatever end it's coming to. It's not ended, but we're kind of there. And so we're maybe wanting to start, we're trying to think a little bit beyond that finally. What and how does technology play into that? What would your advice be to any congregation that's, having those discussions right now?
Well, you need to look at the bigger picture and look at your overall goal. You need to have a strategy. That's the other thing I work with them with their digital ministry is you need to have a strategy and look at your mission statement and what is your mission and what are you trying to accomplish and who are you reaching and who's your demographic, which is probably going to be different now that you've been doing some things online. Mm-hmm. And you really got to sit down and have a long-term plan because we did this even happened when we first started with social media. We were kind of doing things at the seat of our pants. And then we realized, we really have to have an overall plan, an overall strategy. And the same thing with COVID. We just did the best we could because it came out of nowhere. We were we did and that's excellent.
Exactly,
but now the time has come to start to have a strategy, and that starts with your mission statement. That starts with knowing your community, knowing who are you reaching, who do you want to reach, where are the people you want to reach, and then you go from there. And hopefully you'll. In my synod, I help people with that. Hopefully, there's your leaders would have that. Hopefully, you have an adjudicary that can maybe help you look at the bigger picture. But that'd be my biggest piece of advice, because it's going to be different for every context, mm-hmm. which is why now that you know what you're doing, let's look at the big picture and develop a strategy.
I like that. One other thing, kind of shifting subjects a little bit from the church leadership. I know that you have led some interesting classes with young people about social media, and I really have always loved the way you talk about selfies. And if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of your theology of the selfie, if you will, with our listeners, I really think they'll enjoy it.
I'm trying to remember exactly how I did. I remember doing a children's sermon where I took a selfie with the kids, and I said, this is do you want to see the image of God? And I took a selfie and I said, that's the image of God, because if we believe that human beings are made in the image of God, then a selfie, a picture of yourself, is the image of God. When you share a selfie, people make fun of, particularly girls. They particularly make fun of girls who share selfies. And I think they are sharing themselves mm-hmm. and what mood they are in. And when share a picture if you believe in the incarnation, that God is with us wherever we are. Online that's real life. Those are real people that you're talking to, and you're looking. The selfie is a good way to remind you these are real human beings. Mm-hmm. Jesus is where people are. People are doing things on digital and online, then that's where Jesus is. And if you want to help them see Jesus, you need to be online where the people are. So we had a middle school lock-in, and the theme was my selfie, myself. It talked about Jesus on the cross. It's kind of like God's selfie, that Jesus is God's selfie, right?
Mhm.
That's how we show a selfie to show ourselves to people. God sent Jesus as a selfie to show himself to people. So I didn't think of that. That was done by she was I wish I could think of her name, but she went off to seminary, but she was a campus minister at UNI, and she came up with that, but I hardly endorse it. But when some people saw that title, my selfie, God selfie, Jesus God selfie, they were, what? They're a little, but once they heard it explained, they were like, oh yeah, right.
Yeah. I think I think that, to me, that's a good point, because, we think about online and we like to judge a lot of people's behaviors, and we kind of forget that that's a real person back there that is, even, kind of when Jesus said, when you've done this unto the least of these, you've done this unto me. I mean, that is Jesus. And we sometimes forget that when we're in the fights or the internal politics, or just, I wish she'd quit sharing those photos because I'm tired of looking at her, or whatever it is that we forget, and we start to objectify the person, if you will, as opposed to, no, that is God's creation, and that is the image of God. So I really love that, and I think it helps us, connect with humanity. That's an example for me of technology helping us better connect with humanity when we look at it through our theological lens and the teachings of Christ. So I appreciate you sharing that with our listeners. Unfortunately, we're out of time. The time always goes so fast on the show. Joelle and
That's better than it dragging on, right?
That's true. But Joelle and I could probably go on for another couple hours. We've done it before, but that just means I'll have to have her back on the show sometime, and we can talk about other aspects of digital ministry. I want to thank you, Pastor Joelle, for being our guest on How We Do Digital Ministry. I'd like to invite all of our listeners and viewers to subscribe on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe on Apple Podcast, or that other cool place that I can't remember. Spotify, that's that other cool place. Subscribe on Spotify if you're listening to the audio. Pastor Joelle, how can our listeners find you and follow you online?
Well, I'm on all the social medias by my full name, Joelle Colville-Hanson. I am on Facebook. If you look, Joelle Colville-Hanson. I'm Twitter, I think it's Pastor Joelle, but it's also Joelle Colville-Hanson. So I'm on Instagram, Pastor Joelle Colville-Hanson. I would tell you TikTok, but all I do is watch TikTok. I have not actually made anything on TikTok, but I love to watch it. And I will friend anyone. If just don't be a jerk. That's my that's my philosophy. And I usually, everything I post on Facebook is public anyway. So even if you don't want to friend me, you can just follow me, because I don't have any secrets.
Well, good. Well, we'll be sure to list those links in our show notes, so you can do that. So y'all can follow Joelle and connect with her and continue this conversation. Speaking of continuing this conversation, I'd like to invite all of y'all, if you haven't already, join our private Facebook group named How We Do Digital Ministry. That's how we carry on this conversation in between episodes, week to week, with other church leaders. You can join in and see how we do digital ministry. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in this week. It's a blessing to have you here, Joelle. Thank you again. And
thank you.
You're welcome. Peace and blessings to all.